with the pivots, with the switch-ins, switch-outs, poured onto Amoonguss and Incineroar, but having the immediate burst damage potential from Nils' side is gonna pay testament to that, but we will find out as we have game one of your second semi-final ready up. Flutter Main with the Incineroar over on Nils' side versus the Incineroar and Amoonguss over on Jorijn's.
Yeah, really nice lead here from both players, attacking it in different ways here. We're going to see that booster energy first off activating on that Flutter Main. It is going to boost the special attack on the Flutter Main, making it hit a little bit harder, but it does have access to that substitute, which could keep it safe from those spores from the Amoonguss. So will Jorijn look into that? But he does have this fake out next to the Flutter Main, Nils, and is able to prevent a fake out or even a spore from that Amoonguss.
It is a really nice touch to be able to be immune to fake out, get substitute. It's quite an opportune Pokemon to be able to bring against this lead, whilst if Nils does really want to, can focus onto a terrestrialization into the grass type to negate any sort of spore immediate impact going into it, which seems like it may indeed be the case. So wanting to completely nullify all of this sort of disruption potential coming up from Jorijn.
Yeah, and we do see the grass terrestrialization here on Nils' side of the field, but the Amoonguss not wanting to take any damage this turn, just going for a protect here, seeing what Nils is going to do to set up the fake out coming out to stop and prevent that Incineroar from doing anything this turn. Of course, if it went for the parting shot, it can go through a substitute, but more importantly, Nils has got that substitute set up, keeping it safe, at least going into this next turn.
And I think that is what Nils has identified. He wants to at least be able to not allow Jorijn to disrupt his flow. He wants to get the correct setups going. He needs to make sure that the Ursaluna, if it is in the back, it is brought in before it gets put to sleep and does have that Flame Orb proc in order to completely ignore any sort of disruption impact from the Amoonguss.
Yeah, but now the Flutter Main in a position where it can start putting out damage. It does have to be careful, of course, because now if we see the Incineroar on your side of the field go for a Flare Blitz potentially into that Flutter Main, it would open the door then for that Amoonguss to go for the double up into that slot and then utilize the Spore once again. So Nils has to be a little bit careful, but there is the option here for going for it just to protect here and then maybe parting shot out with the Incineroar reposition, get something in a little bit safer.
Ooh, but we have the Water Terror from the Amoonguss not wanting to fall fell from that Flare Blitz focus if it does come out in combination with a Shadow Ball. But the Flutter Main on the defensive wants to just make sure it keeps its substitutes safe and perhaps gets another Pokemon brought in. However, Knockoff focusing onto the Incineroar does get rid of that very vital Citrus Berry, which could prove dividends later on in the game. Flare Blitz doesn't target down the now susceptible Grass Terror Incin, and the Spore just trying to catch Nils out there and guarantee that the Flutter Main doesn't have a lot to go on in the subsequent turn.
Yeah, really nice use of Protect there from the Flutter Main. Like we said, the double up was maybe coming in from Jorijn. That's exactly what we saw, and allowing the Incineroar on Nils' side of the field to get a really crucial knockoff, taking away a little bit of recovery options for the Incineroar on Jorijn side of the field. Now looking a little bit difficult to get around this combination. Again, the double up here is still present. Now, do you keep the Flutter Main in, allowed to go to sleep, or do you switch it out to maybe something like your own Amoonguss if you have brought that as an option?
There are the switch out potentials, however, none to be found in this turn. Moonblast focuses onto the Incineroar, hoping to be able to bring it down within certain range for a follow-up KO in the subsequent turn, but Parting Shot will be focusing down. Bring this Incineroar to -2, perhaps influencing its potential on breaking that focus, that substitute. And Nils wanting to say, right, you can either get the breaking of the substitute or the Spore onto the Ursaluna.
Yeah, and we do see that Flare Blitz targeted into the Flutter Main, into the substitute. Will it take it or will it break? It looks like it is fading away. This opens the door for the Amoonguss to go for that Spore, shut down this Flutter Main for subsequent turns, and that's exactly what we see. But the door open for that Ursaluna to come onto the field. Like you mentioned before, activate that Flame Orb.
Nice little trade-off from Nils in terms of his probability and forcing Jorijn to pick the slot and maybe even force a read, but it was really nice, safe switch in there, Ursaluna. The Flutter Main can try to go ahead and start withering away the additional turns of sleep, but Ursaluna cannot be put at all to sleep from this point onwards. Ursaluna just wanting to go for the critical damage at this point.
Yeah, and now in an awkward position, the Fluttermane switching out, not wanting to take any unnecessary damage, allowing the Incineroar to come onto the field now, dropping another Intimidate onto the Incineroar on Jorijn side of the field, taking it down to -3 attack, not really affecting the Amoonguss, of course, but it is retreating in this situation, not wanting to take any of those big facades from the onslaught of that Ursaluna, and Gholdengo making its way onto the field as a parting shot coming out, taking the Ursaluna down to -1 attack, will quell those attacks for at least a little while to allow Jorijn to get a foothold in the game.
However, there is still the potential of a very powerful Earthquake, even though it is still at -1 of its attack, to be able to deal really good amounts of damage onto this Gholdengo, given that now the Grass Terra Incin is by Nils's Ursaluna's side. We're going to have to find out special attack increase due to the Porygon 2's download boost, but no Earthquake Facade, dealing so much damage to hit KO onto an EVLA Porygon 2 whilst at -1 attack. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a big bit of damage coming onto the Porygon 2, and really nice spot there from Nils, utilizing the Ursaluna perfectly there. Not going into the Amoonguss, thinking maybe if the Gholdengo does come in there, it's a bit of a wasted turn. Going into that Incineroar instead to make sure you get some good damage, and that's exactly what happened. The Porygon 2 in a little bit of an awkward spot here. Does it outspeed the Ursaluna? Is it able to get a recover off? You have the Gholdengo next to you, but you are at the pressure of the fake out from the Incineroar on Nil's side of the field that can be utilized here, especially into that Porygon 2, maybe get that Earthquake off. Of course, your Incineroar now is a Grass Terra type, so you don't really worry about the Earthquake so much coming out from the Ursaluna, whereas everything on your own side of the field really doesn't want to deal with that.
It really doesn't, but we do have that great potential from the Gholdengo, I would have said, but no fake out. The Incineroar actually outspeeds, knocks the Choice Specs out to hit KO guaranteed, and Make It Rain not dealing anywhere near as much damage as it originally would have, which could have been quite detrimental onto this Ursaluna. Ice Beam Focus does pick up the KO onto the Incineroar, which is, of course, weak to the Ice-type move.
And that doesn't matter one little bit, because the Incineroar going down, it's done its job, it's got the knockout off, and the Ursaluna going for that facade now into the Porygon 2, picking up a huge knockout.
Huge knockout indeed, allowing the board state to immediately fluctuate for both of these trainers in this scenario, allowing them to be able to bring in a fresh Pokemon. But my word, Gholdengo losing the Choice Specs can prove to be quite detrimental in terms of its original damage output calculated by Jorijn's situation.
Yeah, getting the knockoff onto that, removing the Choice Specs before it was able to go for that Make It Rain was absolutely huge there, and allowing the Ursaluna to eventually get that facade off, which is so important into the Porygon 2. Now the Amoongusses on both sides come back onto the field. We've got the Water type on the Jorijn side, and then we have the regular Amoonguss on Nils.
And the thing is about the Water Terra Amoonguss over on Jorijn's side, it can now be redirected for any sort of focus points of spores or general damage which you would like to see, which isn't something you commonly see, but it's great for Nils' positioning.
Yeah, exactly. And that Earthquake as well is hitting for neutral damage on the Amoonguss if Nils decides to go for that. It's a nice, easy turn here. The Make It Rain has dropped the special attack on that Gholdengo already, so it's not going to be doing as much going into this next turn. You've got to expect the Ursaluna going to be able to survive that and then potentially go for an Earthquake, damaging your own Amoonguss, but it could be an option here.
Oh, but staying in, hoping to be enough to pick up the Ursaluna, but not quite. Now brought down to -2 of its special attack, but Nils' Amoonguss does move first, does go for the Spore, and does put asleep that pesky little Amoonguss over on Jorijn's side, whilst we have the Headlong Rush, guaranteeing the KO, bringing Jorijn down to his final 2 Pokemon.
That's a huge turn here and a further step in the right direction for Nils, picking up a big knockout onto that Gholdengo, taking the second Make It Rain after that special attack drop, but more importantly, shutting down the Amoonguss on Jorijn's side of the field, taking advantage of that terrestrialization there. Going to be susceptible to those spores now and taking full advantage, putting it to sleep, not in action going into this next turn.
Whilst Incineroar does come back onto the field, it has fake out. It has been able to bring this attack of the Ursaluna down to -2 of its damage output. However, the Fluttermane is still asleep in the back. It may be opted to be brought in to allow room for this Ursaluna to just pick up an Earthquake KO if Jorijn's Pokemon are brought within the range they need to be.
Yeah, this match isn't over just yet, because that Fluttermane does need to wake up. The Ursaluna in a really precarious position where it probably will go down to another tick of burn damage, but if not very close anyway, and any attack coming out from the Incineroar will probably be enough to pick it up. either way. So that is something that, you know, Nils is going to have to try and think about, try and maneuver around a board position. It looks like locked into that sludge bomb here. If the Amoonguss can get that off into the Incineroar, is it going to be enough to pick up the knockout there? If it is, you're one step away from taking this game one.
And we need to make sure whether there's a Flare Blitz connect there to pick up a KO on Amoonguss, I would say, but the Fake Out wanting to play it safe. Sludge Bomb, not quite enough to pick up the KO. No poison impacted as well. And Amoonguss over on your own side is still asleep. So all of a sudden, we know that at least the Ursaluna, if it can outpace this Incineroar, at least the Amoonguss and the Incineroar is dispatched of, it can likely clean up this game.
Yeah, and the problem is if the Incineroar goes after the Amoonguss here on Nils' side, it has got the Rocky Helmet. Now with that subsequent damage from the Sludge Bomb, the Rocky Helmet recoil will be enough to pick up the knockout. So you've really got to pick your target right. Do you go after the Fluttermane here? If you see a Rage Powder to maybe give the Fluttermane a little bit more room, it could be really detrimental in losing the one big offensive threat that you've got.
As Flare Blitz will be focusing down on the Amoonguss, not quite enough to pick up the KO. Of course, will be dealt damage and actually self-KO due to the Rocky Helmet. The Sludge Bomb does try to connect, whittle down the damage, or the HP of Jorijn's Amoonguss. Although it does wake up, it does try to go for the side Pollen Puff, unfortunately failing, much to Jorijn's detriment.
Yeah, unfortunately the side Pollen Puff would have been so useful there, but not in time. The Incineroar already going down, and now the Amoonguss against the world, as we do see cancellation. Nils taking an early lead in this top 4 game here.
And in what way he was able to do it. We saw a lot of interesting interactions. First couple of points would be, Nils brought Ursaluna, did not bring Porygon 2. It did not bring a dedicated Trick Room mode. He was just more so relying on having the disruption availability from his side, the support Pokemon being the Amoonguss, being the Incineroar with Fake Out pressure as well. And we saw how important it was. Jorijn did try to focus down, break the substitute, which he was able to do it, but at the cost of the Ursaluna being able to be brought in and have the Flame Orb proc.
Yeah, and you saw the detriment of that. It was a really good choice in the end from Nils, where it allowed the Ursaluna in, not being affected by the Spore, so it was free to kind of just fire off those big attacks as it wanted. Porygon 2 did put in some work for Jorijn, like we're seeing now, taking down the Incineroar, but I think at that stage, the damage had been done. We saw it get the jump on the Goldingo, knock off that Choice Specs, which was so pivotal in being allowing the Ursaluna to get these big attacks off. 2-hit KOing Porygon 2, which was huge, removing that speed control and that threat after the download boost.
Yeah, and Water Terrestrialization on the Amoonguss not really paying fruition as Jorijn would have liked there, being susceptible to the opposing Amoonguss. Headlong Rush, picking up the KO onto the Goldingo. But I do want to touch on the point as well, Lee. We saw Nils' Incineroar outspeed the Goldingo, giving a bit of an indication of both of those Pokemon, Incineroar likely being faster and Goldingo being slower.
Yeah, and especially going into this next match as well, because both players have that Incineroar. So if you are Nils going into this next turn and the Incineroar comes out matching yours, you know you can go for the Fake Out into it because you can shut it down pretty easily because you've got the speed information already. You're outspeeding the Goldingo as well. If that comes out from your end, you know you can go for that knockoff into it pretty safely, get rid of that really detrimental Choice Specs item. If that had been on there, it would have really changed the dynamics and the outcome of that game, because the Ursaluna may have not been able to take that as well as it did when that was knocked off.
Precisely. So are we thinking then Jorijn may opt to go for some more a more dedicated form of being able to completely capitalize off of Nils' immediate offensive pressure, or at least its capability of handling a passive lead such as an Incineroar and a Amoonguss from himself?
Yeah, the one thing that you could say is, does Jorijn have access to the, we know it's got the booster energy and the Roaring Moon, but where is that booster energy activating? Is it activating on the speed stat, or is it activating on the attack stat? Because if it is the speed stat, it could get the jump on something like the Fluttermane that was really disruptive in that early game, and then that gives you the outlet to put a lot of pressure on from your side of the field, where it was kind of the other way around in that match. And then having that outlet there could open the door to nearly almost give you the advantage that you need. You've also got the immunity to the earthquakes as well, but we'll see how things are approached as we get into this game 2.
Game 2 leads on our screens. Nils with Fluttermane Incineroar versus a bit of a change-up over on your side, being the Incineroar and the Porygon 2, which does get an attack download boost, not its critical special attack it would have liked.
No, not the critical attack that it would have liked, but still in a good position because it does have that poison terrestrialization that it can go for, and then put immediate pressure on that Flutterman as well as resisting those fairy type attacks. The big thing is here, the Flutterman in a position where right now it can pretty safely set up that substitute if it wants, and we know the speed interaction between the Incineroars. You can really do what you want. You can go for the fake out into the Incineroar on your own side of the field, or you can go for the fake out into the Porygon 2, or you could maybe even protect the Flutterman here, reposition with a parting shot onto something like the opposing Porygon 2, allow it to get the Trick Room up, and then maybe drop your own Amoonguss onto the field, which is going to be in a really great position if we do see the dimensions flipped.
I do still like the fact that the Fluttermane is brought in order to act like a sort of cushion point of being able to guarantee a substitute setup in case there is that Amoonguss focus with a Trick Room later on down the line, confirming as we do see it arrive on the field. Fake out, focusing onto the Incineroar over on Urine's side. No fake out coming out from Urine's Incineroar itself, but Moonblast being able to bring it down to the point where it has to proc that Citrus Berry.
Yeah, and that's a really nice play there from Nils, identifying that maybe the Porygon 2 isn't in the best of positions. Maybe the Amoonguss comes in from Nils, taking it out of the fray and bringing Urine's own Amoonguss onto the field. But by doing that, identifying it, going for the fake out into the Incineroar, getting some really valuable damage onto that side of the field, and now in a position where you can almost go for that protect play here and then position out with your own Incineroar, get your own Amoonguss onto the field.
Yeah, I think being able to already push the aggregate onto Urine in terms of that battle of attrition is so key in order to limit the amount of options Jorijn has available to himself, as we do have the first terrestrialization of Game 2 being that Grass Terra Incineroar yet again wanting to negate any sort of pesky little spores.
Yeah, great terrestrialization for that reason. We are seeing the substitute come out from the Flutterman here, protecting against any potential spores. The Flare Blitz, though, from the Incineroar into the Amoonguss, the Intimidate really helping out there, taking it down to 50% health. The Rocky Helmet, a little bit of chip damage as well, but it does leave the Incineroar on Urine's side of the field open. It predicts it. Go for the huge Flare Blitz into that side of the field, taking massive damage here. And the Amoonguss now left to go for a big attack or a supporting option move if it chooses to.
It could try to target down the Pollen Puff right now if this is a dedicated read for both slots, but no, wanting to at least try to cover for both scenarios. The Grass Terra all remaining on the field and still remaining susceptible to those spores. So a nice little middle ground play from Jorijn. However, you do really need a hard commit in order to slow down this momentum from Nils' side.
Yeah, and the problem is now the Incineroar is probably in range of a double up from a Flare Blitz and a Moonblast here. Now, does the Amoonguss pull that away and protect the Incineroar and allow it to potentially take down the opposing Incineroar that's now a Terra type on Nils' side of the field, or do you preserve it for later? And we are seeing it just take a break, get that regenerator activated so it can come later on in this battle.
As we have Porygon 2, the Snow Frolicker, on the field. Attack boost, however, yet again, not that special attack. Moonblast focus into the Incineroar with the Fluttermane, enough to pick up the KO, and all of a sudden, such an integral piece to that 3 Pokemon core is out of this game too, putting Jorijn into a bit of the back foot place, especially with that accompanying parting shot, pivot, and bringing the damage output of the Porygon even further below.
Yeah, and look, we are seeing the Ursaluna come onto the field now safely again. When the Amoonguss isn't a threat, to activate that Flame Orb, so important now, so it isn't going to be susceptible to the sleep. The nice thing that Nils has done here is got that substitute up. It's safe behind that substitute. The Ursaluna in a great position. Flame Orb activated, and now if the Porygon 2 does want to go for that terrestrialization, you can't do it as easy because you are going to be threatened by these big ground-type attacks. Goldingo entering the fray for Jorijn.
I do quite like Golden Go being brought onto the field. It does still have the option of going for that terrestrialization. We know the Fluttermane will likely try to target it down with a Shadow Ball. It depends if Nils is expecting the Terra or not, because we know Choice Specs does sort of lock it in that spot. We know Amoonguss is already in the back, so regardless, Shadow Ball feels a bit safe in this situation if you at least want to guarantee some sort of damage.
Yeah, that would be really good if you can lock it in, of course. But we are seeing the Protect come out from the Ursaluna here, not wanting to contend with any damage coming out from potentially a Goldinger this turn. And we do see the Shadow Ball. Is it enough from the Flutterman? It is not quite enough. The Goldinger hanging on barely by a thread here. Gonna get that Make It Rain off, but protected by the substitute. The Flutterman not gonna take the full brunt of this damage here and break it for certain. But the Porygon 2, what is it gonna do? Is it gonna set up the Trick Room or go after that Flutterman?
It's a very precarious situation for this Porygon 2, especially when it's having to face down this Ursaluna, not setting up the Trick Room. It does want to still be able to have the speed advantage. However, the fact that we do know the Ursaluna wants to try to gauge the speed interactions, something key here. It is very healthy. It does have that Guts proc at the moment via the Flame Orb, so it's ready for the damage.
Yeah, but the damage is being done to that Goldinger now, not in the greatest position because it's an easy Shadow Ball into that slot now for the Flutterman. There's no Protect there, so it's an easy target. Even something coming in is going to take a good amount of damage, and we are seeing the Amoonguss take its place on the field after proccing that Regenerator earlier on. How much damage will it do? Well, it will be significant, but it's not enough to pick up the knockout, taking it down to about 40%. The Ice Beam coming out into the Ursaluna.
As it will be looking to try to retaliate with a Facade into the Amoonguss, does guarantee the KO, and this is looking very grim for Jorijn's Pokemon. Nils is taking all of that immediate damage, focus, momentum, straight to Jorijn's door and wanting to try to barge through to the finals.
Yeah, unfortunate here for Jorijn. You can see what he was trying to do, reposition with the Amoonguss, but getting punished for that. Nils looking right through it, saying, okay, well, if I target it in with the Shadow Ball, yeah, I'll pick up the knockout. I can target in with the Facade. It's not very effective into that immunity, of course, but if something comes in like the Amoonguss, I can pick up a knockout, which is exactly what happened. We are seeing the Shadow Ball here. It is going to be the final blow into the Goldinger. Take Nils one step closer into this finals.
As Ursaluna is going to look to try and close this one out. Ice Beam just for the additional bit of damage there of retaliation. Facade being the real key player, guaranteeing the 2-hit KO. Moonblast will be more than enough to be able to pick this Porygon 2 up, and so detrimental not having the Trick Room being set up there.
Yeah, so detrimental. You would have went for it the last turn, but here is the final blow. Nils Dunlop is your other finalist, moving in to the European International Championships.
And in what way he's been able to do it. It's been a long time coming. He knows how important this is. He's been able to accomplish it. He keeps that consistency going throughout the season, year upon year, much to the potential of being able to run through to the title.
Absolutely incredible play here from Nils from start to finish of this set in true convincing form. Just had complete control every step of the way, utilizing all the tools, the information that he had.